Lady Catherine Ashworth stood at her bedroom window, watching the morning fog roll across the vast grounds of Ashworth's Manor. The grand estate that had been in her family for 3 centuries now felt more like a beautiful prison. Bills scattered. Across her father's desk told the real story behind the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The Ashworth fortune was disappearing faster than morning mist. Her father, Baron Edmund Ashworth, had made terrible business decisions over the past decade. His failed investments in railway stocks, gambling debts, and his expensive taste for fine art had drained their wealth. The servants whispered in hallways about unpaid wages, and Catherine noticed how the gardener's wife looked away when she passed by the cottage, where 3 children waited for their father to bring home money that rarely came. At 24, Catherine had received many marriage proposals from wealthy suitors. She had turned them all down, hoping to marry for love like her late mother had. But love was a luxury her family could no longer afford. The creditors were becoming more aggressive, and her father's health was failing under the stress. Dark circles shadowed his once bright eyes. His hands shook when he thought no one was watching. The morning her father called her into his study, Catherine knew her fate was sealed. Lord Marcus Blackwood, a mysterious businessman from the northern counties, had offered for her hand. He was willing to pay off all their debts and restore the estate to its former glory. The catch was simple. Catherine would marry a man she had never met. Moving to his remote castle in Scotland immediately after the wedding. "He's a good man, Catherine," her father said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Educated, well-mannered, and he's promised to treat you with respect." What he didn't say was that Lord Blackwood was also 15 years older, known for being cold and distant, and lived in complete isolation. The local people in his village spoke of him in whispers, calling him the Shadow Lord, because he rarely left his castle during daylight hours. Catherine spent sleepless nights walking through the manor, memorizing every corner of the home she would soon leave forever. The library where she had spent countless hours reading adventure novels, the music room where her mother had taught her piano, the garden where she had dreamed of dancing at her wedding with a man who truly loved her. All of it would become memories once she said "I do" to a stranger. The wedding preparations began immediately. Dresses were ordered, invitations sent, and arrangements made for Catherine's new life in Scotland. Her childhood friend Emma tried to convince her to run away, but Catherine knew her duty. If she disappeared, her father would lose everything, and the dozen families who depended on the estate for their livelihood would suffer. Her personal happiness seemed a small price to pay for so many others' welfare. 3 weeks before the wedding, a carriage arrived at Ashworth Manor. Lord Marcus Blackwood stepped out, and Catherine watched from her window as he spoke with her father. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and an unreadable expression. He moved with confidence but kept his distance from everyone, including the servants who tried to help with his luggage. Even from her window, Catherine could sense something mysterious about the man who would soon become her husband. That evening at dinner, Catherine finally met her future husband face to face. Lord Blackwood was polite but formal, speaking only when necessary. His dark eyes seemed to study everything around him, and Catherine noticed his expensive but understated clothes. He didn't wear flashy jewelry or try to impress anyone with stories of his wealth. Instead, he ate quietly and answered her father's questions with short, careful responses. When Catherine tried to make conversation about books or music, Lord Blackwood's answers were brief but revealed surprising knowledge. He had read the same novels she loved and could discuss complex philosophical ideas, but he shared nothing personal about himself. It was like talking to an intelligent shadow, present but somehow unreachable. After dinner, her father suggested Catherine show Lord Blackwood the gardens. They walked in uncomfortable silence until Catherine finally asked why he wanted to marry her. His answer was simple and honest. He needed a wife to manage his household and represent him in social situations. He offered her a comfortable life in exchange for fulfilling these duties. There was no mention of love, affection, or even companionship. As they returned to the manor, Catherine realized her new life would be one of comfortable loneliness. She would trade her family's financial ruin for marriage to a wealthy stranger, who saw her as an employee rather than a partner. The romantic dreams of her youth died that evening as she watched Lord Blackwood's carriage disappear into the darkness, taking with it any hope for a marriage filled with joy and love. The wedding day arrived with gray skies and cold wind, matching Catherine's mood perfectly. She stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, wearing her mother's pearl necklace and a wedding dress that cost more than most families earned in a year. The irony wasn't lost on her. She looked like a princess on the outside, while feeling like a prisoner on the inside. The ceremony took place in the village church, where her parents had married 25 years earlier, like their joyous celebration. Catherine's wedding felt more like a business transaction. Lord Blackwood arrived precisely on time, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that made him look even more intimidating. He spoke his vows clearly but without emotion, as if reading from a contract. Rather than promising his life to another person, Catherine's voice trembled as she repeated the traditional words that would bind her to the stranger forever. When the priest announced them husband and wife, Marcus, she supposed she should think of him by his first name now, gave her a brief, formal kiss that felt more like a handshake. The small crowd of guests clapped politely, but everyone could feel the absence of real celebration in the cold stone church. The wedding breakfast was equally awkward. Marcus sat beside her at the head table, cutting his food with mechanical precision and responding to congratulations with nods rather than words. Catherine's cousin tried to lighten the mood with funny stories about their childhood, but Marcus showed no reaction to the humorous tales. It was as if he existed in a different world from everyone else around him. After the meal, it was time to leave for Scotland. Catherine hugged her father goodbye, both of them fighting back tears. He whispered an apology in her ear, and she assured him she understood why this marriage was necessary. As their carriage pulled away from Ashworth Manor, Catherine watched her childhood home disappear behind the trees, wondering if she would ever see it again. The journey to Scotland took 3 days, and Marcus proved to be a silent traveling companion. He brought books to read, attended to correspondence, and spoke only when necessary to arrange stops for meals or rest. Catherine tried several times to start conversations about their future life together, but his responses were so brief that she eventually gave up trying. On the second night, he stayed at a coaching inn where Catherine overheard other travelers discussing Lord Blackwood. The stories were strange and contradictory. Some said he was incredibly wealthy but lived like a hermit. Others claimed he had mysterious business dealings that no one understood. A few whispered that he had been involved in some scandal years ago that made him withdraw from society. Catherine listened carefully but learned nothing concrete about the man she had just married. When they finally reached Blackwood Castle, Catherine was amazed by its size and grandeur. The ancient stone fortress sat on a cliff overlooking a dark lake, surrounded by miles of untamed Scottish highlands. It was both beautiful and intimidating, like something from a Gothic novel. The castle looked like it could house 100 people, yet Catherine saw only a handful of servants when they arrived. Mrs. Morrison, the elderly housekeeper, greeted them at the massive front door. She was kind but formal, showing Catherine to her rooms while Marcus disappeared into what she learned was his private study. Catherine's quarters were luxurious beyond anything she had experienced at home. Silk curtains, ported furniture, and a fireplace large enough to heat the entire room. Yet the luxury felt cold and impersonal, like staying in an expensive hotel rather than moving to a new home. That first evening, Catherine dined alone in a dining room that could seat 40 people. Marcus sent word that he was busy with urgent business matters and would see her in the morning. She ate her meal in the echoing silence of the great hall. Catherine realized this might be her life, surrounded by wealth and luxury, but completely alone. Mrs. Morrison explained the household routine over tea. Marcus kept unusual hours, often working late into the night and sleeping until noon. He took his meals in his study most days and rarely entertained guests. Catherine would be free to explore the castle and grounds, manage the household accounts, and represent the family at local social events when necessary. It sounded more like being the manager of an estate than being someone's wife. The next morning, Catherine explored her new home and discovered its secrets. Hidden behind heavy curtains were rooms filled with artwork that must have cost fortunes. The library contained thousands of rare books, many in languages she didn't recognize. The wine cellar held bottles that looked decades old, and the stables housed horses that were clearly expensive breeds. Everything suggested wealth far beyond what she had imagined. Yet for all its grandeur, the castle felt empty and sad. Most rooms were unused, covered in dust sheets like monuments to loneliness. Catherine found herself walking through endless corridors, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She began to understand why the local people called Marcus the Shadow Lord. He seemed to exist without really living, surrounded by beautiful things but touching none of them with joy or passion. When Catherine finally saw Marcus again at dinner, on her third day, she gathered courage to ask about his work and interests. His answers revealed a sharp intelligence and vast knowledge, but he shared nothing about his feelings, dreams, or fears. It was like being married to a brilliantly crafted statue, impressive to look at, but impossible to truly know or love. Weeks passed in the strange rhythm of Catherine's new life at Blackwood Castle. She established routines to fill the long, quiet days, morning walks around the lake, afternoons in the library, and evenings writing letters to her father about everything except her loneliness. Marcus remained politely distant, treating her more like a respected houseguest than a wife. They shared meals twice a week, made polite conversation about books and current events, but never discussed anything personal. Catherine began noticing odd things about her husband's behavior. Letters arrived at strange hours, delivered by messengers who never stayed long enough to be properly greeted. Marcus often disappeared for days without explanation, leaving word only that he had business to attend to in Edinburgh or London. When he returned, he seemed tired but carried expensive gifts, rare books for the library, fine wines, or beautiful jewelry that he presented to Catherine with no special occasion in mind. The local villagers treated Catherine with curious respect. When she ventured into town, they seemed genuinely fond of Marcus, which surprised her given his remote nature. The baker's wife mentioned how Lord Blackwood had paid for her son's medical treatment in Edinburgh when the boy broke his leg badly. The blacksmith spoke gratefully about Marcus providing tools and supplies when his workshop burned down. These stories painted a picture of a generous man who helped others quietly, never seeking recognition or thanks. Mrs. Morrison proved to be Catherine's main source of information about her mysterious husband. Over afternoon tea, the housekeeper shared carefully chosen stories about Marcus's past. He had inherited the castle and title at age 21 when his parents died in a carriage accident. For several years he had lived normally, entertaining guests and participating in London society. Then something happened. Mrs. Morrison was vague about details that made him withdraw from the world and become the reclusive man Catherine had married. Catherine's curiosity grew stronger each day. She began exploring parts of the castle that seemed unused, discovering rooms that told stories about Marcus's past. One wing contained what had obviously been children's nurseries and playrooms, suggesting the castle had once housed a large, happy family. Another floor held portrait galleries showing generations of Blackwood ancestors. But Catherine noticed that recent family portraits stopped abruptly about 10 years ago. The most intriguing discovery was Marcus's private study, which she glimpsed one day when he forgot to lock the door. The room was filled with maps, charts, and documents she couldn't read from the doorway. She saw what looked like shipping schedules and financial papers scattered across a massive desk. Books about international trade and foreign languages lined the shelves. It was clear that Marcus's business dealings were far more complex than she had imagined. One evening, Catherine was reading in the library when she heard voices from Marcus's study. He was meeting with two men who spoke with foreign accents, and while she couldn't make out their words, their conversation seemed urgent and secretive. When the men left hours later, she watched from her window as they departed in an expensive carriage with no identifying marks. Marcus stood in the doorway watching them leave, and even from a distance, Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders. The next morning brought shocking news that would change everything, Catherine thought. Mrs. Morrison knocked on her bedroom door before dawn, looking pale and worried. A message had arrived during the night. Catherine's father had suffered a heart attack and was asking for her. She needed to leave for England immediately. But when she sought out Marcus to explain the emergency, the housekeeper delivered another surprise. "His lordship left before sunrise," Mrs. Morrison explained. "He received an urgent message and said he might be gone for several weeks. But he left instructions for you, my lady." The housekeeper handed Catherine a sealed envelope with her name written in Marcus's careful handwriting. Inside, Catherine found a brief note expressing sympathy for her father's illness and a bank draft for an enormous sum of money, enough to completely restore her family's fortune and pay for the best medical care available. But what shocked her most was the casual way Marcus had written the amount, as if such wealth meant nothing to him. The note also gave her permission to use his private carriage and travel with a full escort of his men for protection, as Catherine prepared for her journey south. She began piecing together clues about her husband's true financial situation. The carriage he provided was obviously expensive, fitted with luxury features she had never seen before. The men assigned to protect her were well armed, expertly trained, and spoke multiple languages. Their equipment and horses suggested they were accustomed to handling valuable cargo or important passengers. During the 3-day journey to England, Catherine had time to think about the contradictions in her marriage. Marcus lived simply despite obvious wealth, helped others without seeking credit, and surrounded himself with luxury he seemed not to enjoy. His business dealings appeared international and complex, yet he lived like a hermit in remote Scotland. Most puzzling of all, he had married her for practical reasons, but then shown unexpected generosity and consideration during her family crisis. When Catherine reached Ashworth Manor, she found her father weak but recovering. The money Marcus had provided allowed them to hire the best doctors and clear all outstanding debts immediately. Her father was amazed by the generous amount and wanted to know more about his mysterious son-in-law. But Catherine realized she knew almost nothing concrete about the man she had married, despite living in his castle for 2 months, as she sat by her father's bedside. Catherine made a decision that would change her approach to her marriage. When she returned to Scotland, she would no longer accept Marcus's distant politeness and secretive behavior. She had fulfilled her duty by marrying him and helping save her family's fortune. Now she wanted answers about who her husband really was and why he lived such an isolated, mysterious life. The local doctor who attended her father mentioned something that gave Catherine her first real clue about Marcus's secrets. "Lord Blackwood's reputation in medical circles is quite remarkable," he said. "His donations to hospitals and research have saved countless lives, though he never allows his name to be publicized. Some say he's funded entire medical colleges without taking any credit." Catherine filed this information away, beginning to see a pattern of hidden generosity that suggested her husband's wealth was far greater than even she had suspected. Catherine returned to Blackwood Castle after 3 weeks in England, her father's health restored and her determination strengthened. She found Marcus waiting for her in the main hall, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw genuine concern in his eyes when he asked about her father's condition. His relief when she reported the good news seemed sincere, giving her hope that there might be real emotion beneath his controlled exterior. That evening, instead of accepting Marcus's usual polite distance, Catherine insisted they dine together and talk properly. She thanked him for his generosity to her family, but then surprised him by asking direct questions about his business and why he lived in such isolation. Marcus seemed startled by her directness, and she could see him weighing his responses carefully before speaking. "My business involves international trade," he said finally, "requires discretion, and often takes me to places where anonymity is valuable." When Catherine pressed for more details, he admitted that his work sometimes involved political situations where public attention could be dangerous. He had learned years ago that the safest way to operate was to maintain a low profile and let others believe he was simply a wealthy recluse. Over the following days, Catherine noticed changes in how Marcus treated her. He began including her in more conversations, asking her opinions on books they both read, and showing interest in her thoughts about managing the castle's affairs. When she suggested improvements to make the unused wings more welcoming, he not only agreed but provided unlimited funds to implement her ideas. It was as if her direct approach had earned his respect, in a way that polite submission never could. The breakthrough came when Catherine discovered Marcus in his study late one night, surrounded by maps and looking deeply troubled. Instead of retreating, she entered and asked if she could help. Marcus looked up at her with surprise, then seemed to make a decision. Explained that he was coordinating relief supplies for areas affected by natural disasters, using his trade networks to get food and medicine where they were needed most quickly. "This is why you disappear for days at a time?" Catherine asked. Marcus nodded, explaining that his business had evolved over the years from simple profit-making to something more meaningful. He used his wealth and connections to help in situations where governments moved too slowly or politics got in the way of urgent humanitarian needs. The secrecy was necessary because some of his operations crossed political boundaries in ways that could cause international incidents if discovered. Catherine was amazed by this revelation. Her husband wasn't just wealthy, he was using his fortune to save lives around the world. The mysterious meetings, strange letters, and frequent absences all made sense now. Marcus had built a secret network of contacts who could move supplies and people across borders when disasters struck or political situations created humanitarian crises. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Catherine asked. Marcus's answer revealed the loneliness that had driven him to marry her in the first place. Years of keeping secrets and working alone had made him forget how to trust anyone completely. He had married her for practical reasons, but found himself wanting her companionship more than he had expected. However, he feared that knowing about his dangerous work might frighten her or put her at risk. Catherine's response surprised them both. Instead of being frightened, she felt proud to be married to someone who used his privileges to help others. She also felt angry that he had assumed she was too weak or foolish to understand his noble work. "I may have married you out of duty," she said, "but I would have been honored to know. I was marrying a man who saves lives rather than someone who simply hides from society." This honest conversation transformed their relationship almost overnight. Marcus began sharing details about his operations, asking Catherine's advice on logistics and organization. Her education and intelligence, which he had previously ignored, proved valuable in planning complex relief efforts. She had language skills that helped with communications, and her social connections from her aristocratic upbringing provided useful contacts in various European countries. Within weeks, Catherine had become Marcus's full partner in both his public life and his secret humanitarian work. She managed communications while he was traveling, coordinated supply shipments from the castle, and used her charm to gather information from visitors without arousing suspicion. Isolated castle became a hub of international activity, though. Outsiders still saw only a reclusive lord and his quiet wife. The most shocking revelation came when Marcus showed Catherine the full extent of his wealth. His trading operations generated enormous profits. But instead of accumulating luxury, he had been systematically using the money to fund hospitals, schools, and disaster relief efforts across multiple continents. The sparse lifestyle at the castle wasn't from lack of funds, it was because every spare penny went to helping others. Catherine discovered that Marcus owned ships, warehouses and trading companies in dozens of countries. He had agents working undercover in major cities worldwide, ready to spring into action when crisis struck. What had appeared to be a simple marriage arrangement had actually made her partner to one of the most powerful philanthropists in the world, someone whose secret activities had influenced international events for years. As autumn approached, Catherine realized her feelings for Marcus had completely changed. The cold stranger she had married for duty had become someone she genuinely admired and cared about. His intelligence, compassion, and dedication to helping others had awakened emotions she hadn't expected to feel. The question now was whether Marcus's feelings for her had evolved beyond mere practical partnership. The answer came sooner than expected. When Catherine suggested they host a small dinner party to maintain their social facade, Marcus agreed, but made an unusual request. He wanted her to wear the family emeralds that had belonged to his mother, jewels worth a fortune that he had never offered to previous dinner guests. When she asked why, his answer revealed feelings he had been hiding even from himself. "Because," Marcus said quietly, "I want everyone to see that my wife isn't just fulfilling a duty anymore.
Oh.
She's become the most important person in my world, and I want her to know it too." For the first time since their wedding day, Catherine saw real emotion in her husband's eyes, and she realized that their marriage of convenience had become something neither of them had dared to hope for. The dinner party proved to be a turning point in ways neither Catherine nor Marcus could have anticipated. The guests included local aristocrats, a visiting diplomat from France, and two businessmen from Edinburgh who had been Marcus's acquaintances for years. As Catherine wore the stunning emerald necklace and matching earrings, she noticed how differently people treated her. The jewels were clearly recognized as priceless family heirlooms, marking her as someone of genuine importance rather than just a convenient wife. During the evening, Catherine overheard conversations that revealed just how extensive Marcus's reputation was among those who knew him well. The French diplomat mentioned gratefully how Marcus's business connections had helped evacuate French citizens from a dangerous situation in Morocco. One of the Edinburgh businessmen spoke of Marcus funding an entire expedition to deliver medicine during a cholera outbreak in India, though he had requested complete anonymity for his contribution. After the guests departed, Catherine and Marcus shared their first truly intimate conversation. Sitting by the fire in his study, surrounded by maps of their ongoing relief projects, Marcus admitted that working alongside her had changed everything for him. He had spent 10 years believing that his dangerous work required complete isolation. But Catherine's intelligence and support had made him more effective than he had ever been alone. "I used to think love was a luxury I couldn't afford," Marcus told her. "My work required too much secrecy, too much risk, too much time away from home, but you've shown me that the right partner makes everything possible rather than impossible." Catherine's heart raced as she realized he was finally expressing feelings she had begun to hope for but hadn't dared to expect. Catherine confessed that her own feelings had transformed completely. The duty that had brought her to Scotland had evolved into genuine affection, then admiration, and finally love for a man whose hidden nobility surpassed anything she had ever imagined. "I thought I was sacrificing my dreams of love for my family's security," she said. "Instead, I found a love deeper than anything I had dreamed possible." Their first real kiss as husband and wife happened in that firelit study, surrounded by evidence of Marcus's secret work to make the world better. It was nothing like the formal peck at their wedding ceremony. This kiss sealed a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, growing love that had surprised them both with its intensity and sincerity. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened as they worked together on increasingly complex humanitarian projects. A devastating earthquake in Portugal required coordinating relief supplies from multiple countries, and Catherine proved invaluable in managing communications between Marcus's agents. Her social skills helped her gather intelligence from diplomatic sources, while her organizational abilities kept track of supply chains that spanned continents. The winter months brought their greatest challenge yet: political upheaval in several Eastern European countries had created thousands of refugees who needed immediate help to survive the harsh weather. Marcus's network was stretched to its limits, and success would require risking exposure of his operations on a scale that could endanger everything they had built together. Catherine surprised Marcus by proposing a bold solution. Instead of trying to keep their humanitarian work completely secret, she suggested they create a legitimate charitable foundation that could operate openly while concealing the full extent of Marcus's resources and connections. This would allow them to coordinate larger relief efforts without risking exposure of his most sensitive operations. The plan worked brilliantly. The Blackwood Foundation became their public face, allowing them to work with governments and other charitable organizations while maintaining plausible explanations for their remarkable effectiveness. Catherine became the foundation's public representative, using her aristocratic connections and natural charm to build support among Europe's wealthy elite. As spring arrived, Catherine realized their marriage had become everything she had once dreamed of and more. Marcus was not only her husband, but her closest friend, intellectual equal, and partner in work that gave their lives profound meaning. The castle that had once felt like a beautiful prison had become a center of international humanitarian efforts, filled with purpose and activity. The depth of Marcus's wealth, This became clear when he showed Catherine his complete financial records. His trading empire generated enough profit to fund their relief operations while still accumulating vast reserves for future emergencies. He owned properties in major cities worldwide, maintained relationships with banks in every important financial center, and had built a network of contacts that could move money and supplies anywhere in the world within days. "Why did you choose to use your wealth this way?" Catherine asked one evening as they reviewed reports from their latest relief operation. Marcus's answer revealed the tragedy that had shaped his adult life and explained his years of isolation. 10 years earlier, Marcus had been engaged to a woman named Alina, who shared his idealistic dreams of using wealth to help others. They had planned to marry and work together on humanitarian projects. But Alina was killed in a carriage accident while traveling to oversee one of their first major relief efforts. Her death had convinced Marcus that involving anyone else in his dangerous work would only lead to more tragedy. "I convinced myself that caring about someone meant putting them at risk," Marcus explained. "So I stopped caring, or tried to. I married you for practical reasons because I thought I could never again love someone enough to worry about losing them." His voice was quiet as he continued, "But you changed everything. You made me realize that Alina would have wanted me to find love again, not spend my life hiding from it." Catherine understood now why Marcus had seemed so emotionally distant during their early months of marriage. He hadn't been cold or unfeeling. He had been protecting himself and her from the pain he associated with loving someone in his dangerous world. Learning to trust her with his secrets had been the first step in learning to trust her. With his heart, their love story reached its culmination. During a spring evening, when they received news that their latest relief operation had saved thousands of lives during a famine in Africa. As they celebrated this success privately in their study, Marcus presented Catherine with a ring that had belonged to Alina, not as a replacement for his first love, but as a symbol that Catherine had helped him heal from that loss and find new purpose in both love and life. "Alina would have loved you," Marcus said as he placed the ring on Catherine's finger. "You're everything she was, and more brave enough to share this work, intelligent enough to improve it, and loving enough to heal the parts of me that I thought were broken forever." Catherine realized that their marriage had not only saved her family's fortune, but had rescued two people who had given up on finding true love. 2 years after their wedding, Catherine stood in the same spot where she had first watched Marcus arrive at Ashworth Manor, but everything had changed. She was no longer the desperate young woman marrying for duty. She was Lady Catherine Blackwood, respected philanthropist and beloved wife of one of Europe's most influential humanitarian leaders. The castle that had once felt empty now buzzed with activity as their foundation coordinated relief efforts across 3 continents. The transformation in Marcus was even more remarkable. The cold, distant man who had barely spoken during their wedding had become someone who laughed easily, shared his thoughts freely, looked at Catherine with such obvious love that even strangers could see their deep connection. He still maintained necessary secrecy around his most sensitive operations, but within their private world, he held nothing back from the woman who had become his true partner in every sense. Their success in humanitarian work had attracted attention. From royalty and government officials across Europe, Queen Victoria herself had privately commended their efforts during a cholera outbreak in London. Though she understood the need to keep their involvement confidential, the French government had secretly awarded Marcus a medal for his role in evacuating civilians during a war in North Africa. Catherine had been offered positions on several international charitable committees. The castle reflected their new life together. Wings that had been closed and dusty were now bustling with activity as staff managed correspondence, tracked supply shipments, and coordinated with agents worldwide. Catherine had converted one floor into comfortable guest quarters for the stream of visitors who came to discuss relief operations or seek assistance for new crises. The lonely fortress had become a center of international cooperation and hope. Catherine's relationship with her father had also been completely restored. Regular visits between England and Scotland were now possible thanks to their wealth. And Baron Ashworth had regained his health and dignity along with his fortune. He often told friends proudly about his daughter's important work, though he kept the more sensitive details confidential. The estate he had nearly lost was now more prosperous than ever, employing dozens of local families and serving as a model of responsible land management. The most significant change came when Catherine discovered she was expecting their first child. Marcus's joy was overwhelming. The man who had convinced himself he could never risk loving anyone completely was now anticipating becoming a father. They spent hours planning how to balance their humanitarian work with raising children, and Marcus began designing secure areas of the castle where their family could live safely while still managing their global operations. Their partnership had evolved beyond what either had imagined possible. Catherine's suggestions had improved the efficiency of their relief operations. Her social connections had opened doors that had been closed to Marcus's solitary efforts, and her emotional support had freed him to take calculated risks that achieved far greater impact. Meanwhile, Marcus's wealth and established networks gave Catherine resources to implement charitable projects on a scale that would have been impossible working alone. The revelation of Marcus's true wealth came gradually, and the full extent still amazed Catherine. Beyond his trading companies and property holdings, he had quietly accumulated investments in new technologies, railroad companies, and emerging industries that generated enormous returns. His fortune was large enough to influence international markets, yet he lived modestly and used almost every penny to help others. One autumn evening, as they reviewed their foundation's annual report, Catherine realized they had coordinated relief efforts that had directly saved over 50,000 lives in just 2 years. Their network now included agents in 40 countries, relationships with major banks on every continent, and the ability to move supplies anywhere in the world faster than most governments could respond to emergencies. "Do you ever regret marrying me for duty instead of love?" Marcus asked as they walked through the gardens where they had first discussed their practical arrangement. Catherine's answer came easily. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. "I regret nothing," she said. "Duty brought us together, but love made us partners in the truest sense. I married you to save my family's fortune, but you saved something far more precious. You saved my belief that one person can make a difference in the world." Their love story had become inseparable from their shared mission to use privilege and wealth to reduce suffering wherever they found it as winter approached. Bringing news of disasters and political upheavals that would require their intervention, Catherine and Marcus planned their response while also preparing for parenthood. Their child would grow up in a world where enormous wealth came with the responsibility to help others, where love meant working together toward something greater than personal happiness, where duty and affection were not opposing forces, but complementary strengths. The final surprise came when Catherine learned the true extent of Marcus's influence on international events. Documents in his private safe revealed that his humanitarian interventions had prevented 2 wars, influenced 3 major diplomatic negotiations, and quietly shaped political outcomes in ways that had reduced human suffering on a massive scale. Her husband wasn't just wealthy, he was one of the most powerful, unofficial diplomats in Europe. Using compassion and practical assistance to achieve what armies and treaties could not, standing in their study on a snowy December evening, by maps marking their ongoing projects and letters from grateful recipients of their aid, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A marriage that began with resignation and duty had become a love story that spanned continents and saved lives. The Baroness, who had wed for practical reasons, had discovered that the deepest love often grows from shared purpose rather than romantic idealism. Marcus joined her at the window, placing his arms around her as they watched snow fall over the Scottish Highlands. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Catherine smiled as she felt their unborn child move within her, already a symbol of